On this episode, we are counting down our top 10 favorite Simpsons episodes according to Captain Nostalgia and Allen Cramm from You Have to Watch This podcast. Well, I am Captain Nostalgia, and this is the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. Grab a donut, grab a duff, because the show starts right now. Well, as we said in our intro, we are counting down our top 10 favorite episodes, and we have not seen or talked about what's on this list, so we are hearing each other's lists as you're hearing ours. And, man, this has been an episode that I've been wanting to do for so freaking long. We did a top 10 episode list last year where we did all of like the predictions. Every time that the Simpsons predicted it right, we did an episode on that. But this is the top 10 favorite episodes of all time.
Yeah, and my list is going to be very different from yours, I think. And what's great about this is everyone can have their own favorites. It's not like, oh, this is the best episode. We're saying these are our favorites. So if you disagree, you can disagree. You can have your own top 10 list. But I'm really excited to see what you've got on your list.
As I am super excited to have on your list, but I think before we get into our list, we should kind of talk about where in our lives we met the Simpsons, because I think that also too, we had two different environments we grew up in, but yet we've had this definitive appreciation for this family for so long.
Yeah, for me, it was, I would come home from school in elementary school and I would watch Fox Kids. So that would be Power Rangers, Batman, the animated series. And then that would transition to the Fox evening lineup. So at 5 o'clock, it was The Simpsons. Batman would end at 4:30. At 5 o'clock, it was The Simpsons. So I would just watch that. And I wasn't allowed to watch it, but I still did. Because I had my own TV in my room. It was black and white. So I got to watch a lot of these episodes in black and white for the first time. At the beginning there, it was weird for me to watch them in color, but that's how I started watching The Simpsons. Just whenever it was on, it was the syndicated repeats that I would catch. And then I got into the newer episodes probably around 2000, 2001. I started watching it the new episodes live.
Yeah. So I had a friend in elementary school that his mom let him watch The Simpsons, and I wasn't allowed to watch them, similarly to you, and yet I still watched him. I would go hang out at his house, and just we would just watch The Simpsons. And it was for our area of the country, it always aired at 6 and 6:30, and then the WB would actually air another episode at 7. So I would watch an hour and a half every day, Monday through Friday, of The Simpsons. And then when I was 10, I tried to convince my parents that The Simpsons were educational. And that kind of blew up in my face, because my parents have a very staunch bedrock that if it's animated, it cannot be educational, which I have come to disprove in the years since.
Yeah. Well, I remember at one point in high school, we watched an episode of The Simpsons to learn.
Same.
It was in a film class. It was to learn narrative structure. So the teacher, Mr. Hankus, showed us Lisa the Beauty Queen from season 4, episode 4, because I have that on my list as a side note. We would watch that, and that's the one where Lisa that goes through the beauty pageant, and Homer has to give up his blimp tickets. So that one always sticks with me, as this is what taught me narrative structure, rising action, climax, resolution, all of that stuff.
Yeah, we also watched there's an episode, one of the anthology episodes, where they would take famous stories throughout history. Our history teacher had kind of gone through that, and then as I got older, my parents kind of started accepting this as a part of like my passion for pop culture. Like growing up, I loved two things. I loved film and I loved The Simpsons. And like probably where the two worlds met, and we've talked about this all the time, is The Simpsons movie, which was originally supposed to come out in 2001. They went through so many different story ideas, and then finally in 2007,
yeah,
we finally got the Simpsons movie full-fledged in all of its glory.
Yeah, if we over on You Have to Watch This podcast, we're always talking about things that like movies the Simpsons ruined for us, like they just like make jokes of. And it's not on my list, but we just did Citizen Kane over there. Like none of us had seen Citizen Kane, but we're all like, yeah, the Simpsons kind of gave away what Rosebud was like a while ago. So we all knew that mostly because of the Simpsons.
The Simpsons also ruined Citizen Kane for me. I knew who Rosebud was, or as the Simpsons had it, it was Bobo.
Yeah.
Way before I ever saw Citizen Kane for the first time. And last year when we were preparing for our Mank episode, I went and just did Citizen Kane, the RKO Pictures biopic that they did last year, or back in '99 on HBO, Mank, and then the Simpsons episode. And that was kind of like my power block of Citizen Kane. That episode is so freaking good.
All right, so do we want to get into these top 10 lists then, or?
Yeah, I'm game for it. Let's do this. Let's get in, and so we'll go back and forth. And in the past, when we've done top 10 episodes, we've typically split them in two. But you guys are going to be treated to a supersized episode on this one. So if you have to listen to multiple parts, take a bathroom break, go eat lunch, whatever. We're going to be here. But Alan, I will let you go first, being the guest.
All right. Now,
10.
do we want to go over the disclaimers of the rules we set for these lists?
Yes, that's a great point. So these lists, when we made them, they feature no Christmas, no Treehouse of Horror episodes. There are a couple holiday episodes that I know that Alan does have.
I'm pushing it when I said that. It does. It's not really holiday specials or anything. Yeah.
So
I can just go with my number 10 pick because it is the one that's breaking the rule. It's Thanksgiving of Horror, season 31, episode 8. This is from a few years ago. It is a Thanksgiving episode, but in the format of the Treehouse of Horror. So it's 3 different sketches about the Thanksgiving holiday. Have you seen this one?
I have. Once the Simpsons gets past season 30, I have kind of been very sporadic with what I've seen, but I have seen this one.
All right. Yeah. So this one, it does 3 sketches. The second sketch is a parody of Black Mirror, where Marge is like a AI living in this time capsule. The third segment is a parody of like Alien, where the kids are living in a spaceship and the cranberry sauce turns into the blob and just starts eating everything. The reason this is on my list is the first segment of this episode is the Simpson family as a bunch of turkeys, and they spend the whole episode talking in gobbles. And it is the funniest thing I've seen on The Simpsons in a long time, to the point where this has now become a annual watch for me around Thanksgiving. It's like I gotta at least watch the segment where Homer, Bart, Maggie, and Lisa are all turkeys being hunted by Chief Wiggum, who's the Pilgrims. Like it's just the funniest thing to me.
That reminds me of, do you remember the episode where they had it was another like trilogy segment episode, and they were doing proposed spin-offs from The Simpsons, and they had the Family Time Hour.
The Simpsons spin-off spectacular. That's one of my honorable mentions, but I'll bring it up. Yeah, that one is... when The Simpsons does this, the breaks format, it's always a good time.
Yeah, they did like an episode where they were like all like dressed up as like beavers, and that's the episode because it's like a sketch within like the larger.
Yeah, they do a variety
confined.
show, and it's they have a special guest star Tim Conway,
Yeah.
and Homer says, "What's a Tim Conway?" And Tim Conway's like, "About 120."
Yeah. So my number 10 is similar to you. Like I watched a lot of syndication, and it was probably around 2000, 2001 that I had started kind of watching these episodes live. And one of the very first seasons that I had actually started watching live, this episode is always kind of stuck with me, and it is my number 10 is I Am Furious, in parentheses yellow. This is season 13, episode 18, and this is the episode where Bart creates a comic and it goes viral, and the entire comic is called Angry Dad, and it's just like him observing Homer and then turning it into a parody. And somehow he also turns into the Hulk at the end of the episode. I just remember so vividly all of the commercials for this one. Yeah. Even when they would actually play the syndicated version of them, like 4 or 5 years later, like I just remember him actually like in the pool and like all of the cops like surrounding him. And Bart says, "Well, I did not see that coming."
So 2 things about this episode. You also buried the lead that this is the Stan Lee cameo episode.
Yeah.
So Stan Lee, like, does he like roll around in radioactive waste in this? Or am I thinking of something else?
No, you are. You're thinking about it. And there's another great Stan Lee scene where Bart goes to the comic book store and he's like, "Oh, Stan Lee's here again?" He's like, "Stan Lee never left." And he's
Yeah.
trying one of like the nerds that I can't remember his name, but he's trying to buy a Batman action figure for the Batmobile. And he's like, "You know what would be even better for the Batmobile than Batman? The Thing." And he like tries to stick the thing, and these like kids just like falling to tears the entire time.
So, funny story about that episode. Back when FXX was doing the Simpsons marathons, like that was the best thing ever for me. Like whenever I was at somebody's house and they had FXX, because I didn't have cable at the time, I would put on the Simpsons because I wanted to watch these marathons. They had a marathon going the weekend of my wedding. So I'm getting ready for my wedding, putting on my tuxedo, watching this episode. So like my best man's across the hall, and I'm like, "Dude, put on channel whatever. It's the Stan Lee episode of The Simpsons." Like, "Oh, dude, I gotta watch that." So we watched that as we were getting ready for my wedding. Like we're putting on our tuxes, watching Stan Lee cameo on The Simpsons.
That is amazing. Like
Yeah.
legitimately amazing. I'm kind of jealous that I didn't get to do that for my own wedding.
And if my wife was there, it definitely wouldn't have happened. But she wasn't my wife then, so I was like, my last act as a bachelor was I'm watching The Simpsons before I go get married, and it's gonna be awesome. And now the day just got better from there. Everything was coming up Allen.
Everything is better with just a touch of The Simpsons. But what do you have for number 9?
Number 9. My number 9 is, let me get back to the list, Simpson Califragilisticexpialidocious. The Simpsons Mary Poppins parody episode. It is season 8, episode 13. So in this episode, Marge starts going bald from stress. So they decide to hire a nanny. And after Homer accuses all of the tryouts of being men, a la Mrs. Doubtfire, Sherry Bobbins, not Mary Poppins, Sherry Bobbins comes into town on her umbrella and moves in with the Simpsons and becomes their nanny. And the whole episode is just a straight parody of Mary Poppins. Are you familiar with this episode?
I am. And when I was making my list, this is probably, ironically, one of my least favorite episodes.
Oh, really?
I'm not a huge Mary Poppins fan, and so when they made this episode and somehow like Grandpa had like a romantic connection to Sherry Poppins, or at least they tried to make it that way. like I always kind of cringe at that, but there's a lot about this episode that it just never like stuck to me.
See, for me, I get the music on my phone all the time. And I always liked Mary Poppins growing up. One of my favorite jokes in this, though, is they have Groundskeeper Willie be the Dick Van Dyke of this episode. So they come across him being the one-man band in the park, and he talks about how Sherry Bobbins and him were engaged, but she was blind, and as soon as she got her eyesight back, she left him. And then she's like, "It's good to see you again, Willie." Like, "That's not what you said before." And then he like storms off with the drums on him. Yeah, I think this is one of the better musical sitcom episodes that there is in existence. It's definitely one of the strongest full-on musical episodes of The Simpsons. And there aren't many, but there's one where they're kind of doing like an Evita thing with Lisa in like season 15 or so. I wasn't a big fan of that one, but I really like this one that is just like a good parody of Mary Poppins and a good musical episode on its own.
Yeah, I did get the two things mixed up because Grandpa's the one that wants to be with Sherry and Willie was the one that had the relationship.
Yeah.
All right, so
that's my number 9.
All right, so my number 9 is actually a dual storyline, and it is worst episode ever from season 12, episode 11. And in this episode, Bart and Milhouse get banned from the comic book store, and comic book guy has a heart attack, and so they're left in charge, and that ends very poorly because Milhouse spends all of the budget on a comic produced by Lens Crafters called Biclops, and great stuff happens throughout that line. But then during his recovery, comic book guy's trying to get back into society, so he actually ends up like starting to date Agnes Skinner, which just makes for some crazy things. Just some really, really memorable moments, this one. But I think the reason I like this episode so much is Bart and Milhouse kind of like their last ditch efforts at to keep the comic book store alive after the Biclops finagle is to host a illegal film festival, which is just makes for some like really funny random things. There's a subplot that's thrown in there where Homer somehow traps a radioactive monkey in Ned Flanders' house, and then it's like the very last shot, Flanders is driving the monkey, and the monkey is just very abusive. It's a very funny episode. Tom Savini guest stars in this episode, and if you guys have listened to our content in the past, you guys know that I'm a huge apologist for horror, and so getting to see him in this was awesome.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that one. That's not one of my go-tos. Season 12, though, is surprisingly strong. A lot of people say after season 10, the show kind of falls off. I've got several on my honorable mentions list from season 12. And I remember watching that one, like when I got the DVD set, I remember watching that one specifically and be like, man, there's some solid episodes in here. But all right, so do we want to move on to my number 8?
Yeah, we can. I will say that I do agree with you. Season 12 is probably my second favorite season, right behind season 6.
Looking at my list, I have a lot of I have one season 6. I have like the 2 outliers that I had to watch on Disney Plus, and then I have everything else that I had on DVD, and I stuck to 4 seasons for the DVDs. So and most of them were like just jumping from disc to disc in one season, and I think it was season 6 that I had to do that for. So my number 8 pick is Homer is where the art isn't. This is from season 29. This is episode 12. This is another newer episode of The Simpsons. But it's not your typical episode of The Simpsons. There's no couch gag. There's no chalkboard opening. What this episode is, it's a parody of 70 detective shows. So it's a parody of Rockford Files, Banachek, and Columbo. So you have Bill Hader in here as Detective Banachek. And it's just a romp on that style of whodunit mysteries from the 70s that you can watch on like all the different free apps right now. Like Peacock, I know, has a bunch of them. As a parody of those, it's hysterical. And you get to a point in this episode where you have Bill Hader's character visiting the Simpsons, and Lisa's like, what year do you think this is? Because he's like a ladies' man. He's flirting with Marge the whole time. Bart starts taking up his snark as well. It's a really fun episode.
I don't think I've seen this episode, and this makes me very sad because I love Bill Hader.
Yeah, that's part of the reason I watch this. Like, this is like I don't watch The Simpsons regularly anymore when it's new. I just fall behind on it, so I'll catch up when it's done. But yeah, Bill Hader's in here. Cecily Strong has a guest appearance as one of the suspects of the robbery. But it's a really fun episode. I think it's fair to say this is my wife's favorite episode of The Simpsons, because she loves those sitcoms. So when I said I was making this list, she's like, well, you got to put that one on there. It's like, oh no, it's on the list already. And this is the one that you wanted to watch with me. So
that's awesome. So my number 8 is going to be taking it way back to the 5th season, and it's episode 14, Lisa versus Malibu Stacy. And this is one where Lisa basically challenges the corporation behind Malibu Stacy to come up with a more rounded doll. And over the years, like, this has been one that has just really stuck with me, because I have also, if you guys have Hulu, I'd recommend the Rethinking Barbie, I think is the name of the film, but it's a documentary about like Barbie's like struggle to kind of break away from the 50s mold of being blonde and big breasted and kind of appeal to a more wider audience and be a more realistic approach. And that's kind of what Lisa wants to do in this episode. And I just think that this episode is an example of just the depth that Groening and crew have been able to bring to these characters over such a long period of time. Like, it's great to talk about episodes that make us laugh, but this episode really kind of digs deep and really makes you think about the examples that we're setting for the youth through the media that they're intaking that are coming up.
Yeah, this is a very strong episode for Lisa, because I like when they give Lisa a stance on something and have her fight for it. And that's why a few years ago when they had Lisa turn to the camera and kind of defend the whole Hank Azaria as a poo thing was kind of off-putting, because you have episodes like this where Lisa's like, I'm going to fight for this thing that I believe is right, instead of this thing that the corporate's just kind of making me read to the camera. Like, that just felt weird. I'm looking at the Wikipedia for this now, and this is also the episode where Grandpa works at Krusty Burger and loses his teeth in somebody's food. So yeah, this is a good episode.
Yeah, like, don't get me wrong, like, this episode isn't like staunch and like really serious and stoic. Like, it does have those like very like the comedy gold is still here, and that's what I like about like you said, like about some of Lisa's arcs, where they do take these more serious approaches to these subjects. Is you always kind of have that wacky B plot that comes along, and this one just happens to feature Grandpa working at Krusty Burger, which is just so funny in and of itself.
If we were doing top 10 Lisa episodes, this would definitely be on my list.
Same.
But we're not.
Yeah.
So, All right, so my number 7 is I when we were doing this list, I got to put a Sideshow Bob episode on here. I love Sideshow Bob. I love Kelsey Grammer. I decided to go with Brother from Another Series. This is episode 8 or season 8 from season 8, episode 16. This is the episode where David Hyde Pierce guest stars as Cecil, Sideshow Bob's brother. So Sideshow Bob gets out of prison and gets a job working for his brother, and Bart's like, Bob's up to no good. He's trying to blow up the city, and Bob's like, no, I'm just building this dam. And like, there's a lot of Frasier references because the title gets its name from David Hyde Pierce being Kelsey Grammer's brother on Frasier. There's a great bit between scenes. It does the Frasier title card of, Frasier is a sitcom that airs on NBC and then just goes right into the scene. There's a great moment where Bart blinds Cecil and says, "Guess who?" And Cecil just goes, "Maris." Like, so there's a lot of cool little jokes like that through here. But I like that this is I always like the Bart and Sideshow Bob dynamic, and I like it more when Bob's like not trying to kill him. Like, I like it when like Bob's up to Bob's like just trying to live his life, and then Bart's just like interfering here and there, like just being the annoying kid. Like, yeah, I can see why Bob wants to kill him because he's just driving him insane, like interrupting his date with Edna Krabappel. Yeah. Like, so yeah, this is my Sideshow Bob pick for this list.
I do not have any Sideshow Bob on my list, but I do really enjoy the dynamic that Bart and him have, even from the get-go, from when they first introduce him in like the end of season 1 or 2, where he frames Krusty for the robbing the Quickie Mart.
Yeah,
and I really do like this episode. This almost made my list and my honorable mentions as well. Not even being a Frasier fan, but just really enjoying a lot of just the dynamics that this episode presents with... I always kind of like it when they expand Sideshow Bob's mythology. Another great episode, too, is where he is in Italy, and he ends up like having a son and with his new wife, and they end up like training the son to kill the Simpsons. It's another great Bob moment.
Yeah, Sideshow Bob is one of those characters that if I know there's a Sideshow Bob episode, I will probably watch that the week it airs because they're just so much fun. And I almost put Cape Fear because that's another one that plays on the soundtracks a lot. I just love Sideshow Bob saying, "I shall send you to heaven before I send you to hell." Like, I just love that line so much. If they gave Kelsey Grammer a show where he just played Sideshow Bob, I'd be okay with it.
I would be down for a Sideshow Bob episode. It's been a while since we've seen him in anything relatively new, I think.
Last thing I saw Kelsey Grammer in was that Nick Cage movie.
Grand Isle, which you guys hear our review of wherever you guys get your podcast from, but do it after this episode. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also Veteran Hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us. And my number 7 pick is from season 6. And it is episode 18. And this is A Star is Burns. And this is the episode where they bring in Jay Sherman, who was a animated critic who hosted a show very similar to Siskel and Ebert / Robert Ebert and Roper later, which was always a favorite show of mine growing up. But basically, Marge puts together a film festival, and Burns wants to kind of like dominate that. And this episode just really has... this is probably my favorite Barney Gumble moment of all time. The short film that he ends up doing, I quote constantly. And I say it to like random people out of context, and they're just like, man, what? Always kind of like really sad, which is really weird for someone that runs a mental health podcast. I just want to quote that. Just want to say
what is the quote that you do all the time?
Don't cry for me. I'm already dead.
Okay.
Which is so random to hear, but
yeah.
I really just kind of, this episode as an adult now and doing everything that I do for victims has really brought me to a place where like I appreciate film, and having done several film festivals myself as a critic now, I really enjoy kind of the difficulty of like, I relate more to Homer in this episode because like, you know, he's basically having to not go with a bias. There's a great scene where he's watching back all of the shorts, and he's like, man, he's like, football in the groin has a football in the groin, but Barney's film is so deep and it's moving and it makes you think, and it's just one of the, again, it's something that has just always stuck with me since I started kind of doing more press events with film.
Yeah.
And but this is just such a funny episode too. And Jay Sherman, I think the Critic was one of those series that if you grew up in the 90s and you were a movie buff, like he was just such a funny and entertaining guy. And John Lovitz is one of those actors that I just absolutely adored. So getting to see him in like another context was great.
John Lovitz is one of those guys that I can appreciate some of his work from this like time period, but recently, like after the whole thing, after everything I've heard about what went down between him and Kevin Smith, like I don't want anything to do with John Lovitz nowadays. But that's for another podcast. Yeah, this is a good one. I always remember Man Getting Hit with Football. Some of Hans Mollman's best work, for sure. This was the first crossover episode that The Simpsons did, I believe. Because I think the X-Files one comes later.
Yes, the X-File one comes about a year or two later. Yeah, X-Files comes 2 years later.
So the main ones on The Simpsons were the Critic, the X-Files, and then eventually they did Futurama.
They also did the Family Guy crossover too.
Well, that was a Family Guy episode, so I'm not counting that for this.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
But yeah, they did do that as well. But yeah, I have, like, I thought about putting this one on here. this would be pretty low on my honorable mentions, but this is a good episode. Did I ever tell you I could do a Barney Gumble impression?
No, lay it on me though.
Hi, Homer.
Marge, you're embarrassing yourself. Oh, it's just Barney.
All right, so my number 6 is One Fish, Two Fish, Blowfish, Bluefish. This is going back to season 2, episode 11. This is the episode where Homer orders blowfish at the sushi restaurant, and then the cook thinks that he cut it wrong, so Homer is given 24 hours to live. There's a special reason why this is on my list and why this is one of my favorite episodes. This aired the exact day I was born. January 24th, 1991.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So this episode also features one of the infamous Bart prank calls to Moe's. I am just as old as the Seymour Butts phone call on The Simpsons. So that's like one of the amazing bit of trivia about me. What I like about this episode though is it's early Simpsons, so Homer's not as aloof as he becomes in later episodes. So it's still kind of grounded. The show's still kind of trying to stick to realism as much as possible. So you get to see Homer. You get to see peak Homer. So he's spending time with his dad, working on that relationship, trying to spend time with his kids and Marge. Like he goes to the bar, but he doesn't want to be at the bar. He wants to get home, which is not a side of Homer you get to see that often.
No.
And it definitely is old. Like I think this is the earliest episode I have on my list. So this one was like harder to watch because the animation style is still kind of rough around the edges, but I really enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, this was always a standout when I first got the DVDs for because I think in my opinion The Simpsons don't really get there are some gems within the first 3 seasons, but they don't really get good until Camp Krusty. That's kind of the turning point for me as a viewer and as a fan. And this one though, I always remember ever since I've seen this episode. I'm gonna butcher the name. The Fukushiki, I think is what it's called, but the blowfish is.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Blowfish has always kind of been on my list for things I wanted to try after I've seen this episode.
That's fair. I've just recently gotten into eating sushi. I have not gone near blowfish at all. But this episode does guest star George Takei as one of the sushi chefs, and Larry King reading the Bible on tape. So it's just him listing listing all the different going through the genealogy of the Book of Genesis, and it's it just puts Homer to sleep to the point where you think he dies.
Yeah, there's one of my favorite scenes from that episode is where the chef comes out to the car where the head chef is on a date with Mrs. Krabappel trying to get lucky, and he's like, I'm pretty sure I cut this wrong. And he's like, go away, my hands are busy right now. And he's never breaks, just trying to go for just being intimate with Mrs. Krabappel, and it's so freaking funny.
Yeah. Just going through the list, Krabappel gets around. We said she was a Sideshow Bob earlier, now she's with the sushi chef.
She ends up marrying Ned Flanders later.
Yeah. Which turns out great for
weird.
anyone.
Yeah. Anyways, my number 6 pick is Homer to the Max. And this is episode 13 of season 10, and this is one where Homer is basically there's a fictional TV character named Homer Simpson, and as Alan just said, he is a aloof character, and Homer basically gets bullied, And he changes his name legally to Max Power and ends up getting entangled with rich people and then somehow gets suckered into trying to preserve redwoods. I love this episode to the degree that I legitimately, for 2 years of my life, thought about changing my name to Max Power.
Oh, man. I'm glad you didn't. Yeah, this is one that so since Disney Plus came out, I've been watching The Simpsons from beginning to
Current.
wherever it ends. This is one I watch in that this is not one of my go-tos. I do remember the Homer Simpson on the show starts off as cool and sexy and suave, and then like the next episode he's just like the goofball and like fumbling all over the place. The Andy Dwyer of that cop show, if you will.
Yeah. There's a great scene where Homer is like ready to like see the suave nature of this character, and he even goes to a point like where the character on the show has this like signature where he'll take like a scarf and he'll toss it over his shoulder and he'll go, "That's the end of that chapter." And so Homer buys like 800 scarves. And then they make the transition and Lisa's explaining to Homer how they'll change things, dynamics of characters from like pilot to like actual season. And then you have Ned comes in and he's like, and no one can tell the dilly difference. And it's like a completely different actor. And I just love moments like that where like the Simpsons go for the meta. But I think one of the reasons that I love this episode is there's a scene where Homer as Max Power meets a guy, and his name's like Rich Steele or something like that. And Homer's the guy compliments Homer on the name, and he's like, "Thanks, I got it from a hairdryer."
Oh man, that's a good line. All right, so going into my number 5 pick, I chose
Yes.
I Love Lisa. This is episode 4, season 15. This is the Valentine's Day episode where Lisa gives Ralph Wiggum a Valentine, and then he becomes obsessed with Lisa. I like Lisa episodes when they're like, this is a much lighter Lisa episode than Lisa versus Malibu Stacy. It's Lisa being kind, like Lisa is, and it's also Ralph Wiggum being a Wiggum, for lack of a better term. He's kind, he's innocent, he doesn't know any better. Is Ralph Wiggum the dumbest person in Springfield?
Maybe.
What I like about this episode is like it's Ralph, but he's not like too like they don't overdo the stupidness too much. Like they have him on the roof tarring the tiles on for Homer because he says he'll do anything for Lisa, and Homer's like, "Ooh, really?" And then so he puts him to work. This also is one of the most underused Simpsons meme formats, which is Bart pausing the Krusty show and saying you can see the exact moment where his heart breaks. That's a meme format that I don't see enough of. So internet, we need to fix that. Looking at my notes. So this is a 1-2 punch, actually. It's a Valentine's Day episode, but it's also a President's Day episode. So they do a whole play about about President's Day at the end of this episode, and it has one of the most informative songs on The Simpsons, which is the Mediocre Presidents. And that's the only reason I know that President Harrison died in 30 days, like because of that song. It's really fun. Then you get Bart as John Wilkes Booth coming in as the Terminator. And then like Ralph gives like a really powerful performance as George Washington, which is completely out of character, but also they also like end it with a like they start the episode with him eating cranes, and then he gives like this great performance as Washington. It's like, dang, Ralph, like just keep going.
That scene in particular is my second favorite Ralph moment, where he gives that just dynamite performance. It's so freaking good. And my first one is where well, it'll come up later in my list. But an honorable mention for Ralph moment is me fail English? That's impossible.
Yeah. That is a good one. Yeah. That's my number 5. What do you got?
So my number 5 is going to be taking it back to also in season 4, and a couple episodes earlier in episode 9. And all I can say is, call Mr. Plow. That's my name. That name again is Mr. Plow. Mr. Plow. This episode is where Homer gets conned into buying a snow plow and basically becomes the snowplow king of Springfield until he starts to compete with Barney after Homer gives Barney the idea to get it. And this one is also really great because they also have the Adam West is in this episode.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
Doesn't he just do the Bat Tootsie? Like he just does the dance thing in this? Like they like Adam West is weird, so they like leave him alone. Is that this episode? Or am I thinking of something else?
No, you're thinking of this episode. There's another thing here that I'm pulling up right now. He has a great quote here where they go to this like con, and it opens up on them going to a car show, and Homer's like, "Oh, hey kids, it's Batman." And Lisa says, "Dad, that's not the real Batman, Adam West." "Of course I'm Batman. See, here's a picture of me with Robin." Bart, who the hell is Robin? Adam West, "I suppose you're only familiar with the new Batman movies. Michelle Pfeiffer? Ha. The only true Catwoman is Julie Newmar, Lee Merriweather, or Eartha Kitt. And I didn't need molded plastic to improve my physique. Pure West. And why doesn't Batman dance anymore? Remember the Bat to see?" And then he starts dancing like you were saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, he makes like another cameo in later where like Homer comes to like plow his thing, and he's like, "Yeah," he's like, "there totally was a job for you when I called you an hour ago." And then he like gets in the Batmobile and then drives off.
Yeah. Funny enough, I've actually seen the Batmobile at a car show. So Adam West was not there as far as I know. But yeah, the Mr. Plow jingle comes up in my head every year when I have to shovel out the snow.
It's great. It's a great thing. And to kind of bring it back to our conversation to Citizen Kane too, there's a great Citizen Kane homage in this episode where Homer hires someone, an actual ad campaign agency to create a commercial for Mr. Plow. And it's basically this black and white commercial where this operatic singer is just going to town to a snow globe and then drops the snow globe, and it snow blows away and it just says Mr. Plow. And they're all they stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning to watch this as a family. And Lisa turns to Homer and she's like, "Dad, was that your commercial?" And he goes, I don't know what the hell that was."
And then you have Linda Ronstadt coming in for Plow King. Yeah, this is a good episode. This is definitely in my honorable mentions. I want a Mr. Plow jacket.
I love the scenes with Marge and Homer in this episode where like the Mr. Plow jacket and the key to the city, because there is a point where Homer receives the key to the city, and I also too wanted a Mr. Plow jacket, but the scene in particular, she like gets somehow aroused by him. She's like, no, leave the jacket on.
So I played Simpsons Road Rage, and this was the Mr. Plow truck was one of the vehicles in that game.
That's awesome.
It's also in Hit and Run, but like that's like one of the iconic Simpsons vehicles is the Mr. Plow truck. If they made a Hot Wheel of that, I would definitely get that. Right now, I'll have to settle for the Homer.
That's another great episode.
Yeah. All right. So my number 3 is And Maggie Makes 3. Season 6, episode 13.
You got to go to 4, bro. You skipped one. You got to go to number 4.
I did number 4. No, this is my number 4. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
The 3 in the title threw me off. This is my number 4 pick. And Maggie Makes 3. Season 6, episode 13. There are too many 3s in there for me to get this right. So this is the episode where the family looks at the photo album and Homer tells the story of why there are no baby pictures of Maggie in the album. So it goes through the whole story of Marge finding out she was pregnant after Homer quit his job at the power plant and gets his dream job working at the bowling alley. And then when Maggie's coming along, he has to take his job back. And it's like a great story that focuses on Homer as a father and like him just trying to live his best life. And like when Maggie's being born, he's like very bitter and upset and like not there for it at all. But as soon as her hand wraps around his finger, like everything changes. It's a really strong Homer episode. But it's got a lot of heart, but it's still funny. One of the best bits in this is they play with the narrator of the story. Like Bart takes over the story and like makes it really exaggerated. Like Homer loses his head and then Homer's like, yeah, I didn't have a head. And like, tell the story right. And then at one point, like Homer is trying to figure out a way he can keep working at the bowling alley. He can keep working at the bowling alley if he can increase business 300%. So he tells a story about going into a crowd of people with a gun, yelling "bowling," and Lisa's like, "Dad, tell the story right." And Marge is just like, "No, that's what happened. Like no, that's correct. That's what he did." So I like how they play with the narrator of the story too. But what gets me with this episode is the whole when he has to go back to Mr. Burns and beg for his job back, he gets the plaque of "Don't forget you are here forever." And at the end of the episode, you find out all of those baby pictures are covering the sign up, and it says "Do it for her," and it's just pictures of Maggie all over the place. Like it's one of those moments that it's one of the most iconic moments in The Simpsons for me. It's like that shot of the sign with the Maggie pictures.
Same. It's such a wholesome one too, and one of the best bits of gags in this episode too is there's while he's working at the bowling alley, Homer shines his head.
Yeah.
And his boss comes over. He's like, "Did you stick your head in the ball shiner?" And he's like, "Nope." And you're just seeing it from the point of view of his head. It's such a throwaway gag, but it just lands for me every time I watch it.
There's also Homer like doing the Mary Tyler Moore, "I'm gonna make it after all," and then he throws the bowling ball and just crashes through the floor.
And to the gunshot bowling advertising that he does, I just shared that on my Facebook not that long ago. There's just pages that I found where they'll like take like Simpson like moments and then just like share them daily. And that was one that I've found recently, and one of my friends was like, "Did you really have to do this?" And I was like, "Yes, This is one of the funniest scenes in all of Simpsons.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing it on my Facebook recently, and I was like, I don't know where I saw that, but yeah, I think it was something you shared, so.
My number 4 is going to be also from season 6, but is going to cast Homer in a little bit of more of a negative light, and that is Homer Badman. This is the 9th episode of the 6th season, and basically Homer has to... Homer and Marge go to a candy expo, and Homer gets a gummy Venus, and it's like a one-of-a-kind gummy, and basically it sticks to the butt of the babysitter for Bart, Maggie, and Lisa, and from like every angle he basically looks just like a pervert, like he just is grabbing it, and then it's Willie to the rescue. This episode, I think, just is so ahead of its time from not only the feminist movement that we see in our own day and age now, but also the fact of just kind of how food-driven Homer is and how entertaining it is at the same point. But just it addresses something like sexual harassment and sexual assault in a way that still allows for a comedy, like those comedic moments to come in, but it's still having a raw and real conversation without feeling too heavy-handed.
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely ahead of its time for 1994. This was written by Greg Daniels, who people will know from The Office. One of my favorite moments of this episode is like when he's on the news being accused of this harassment. He's like, "Go pack your bags, kids. Everything will be fine when we move under the sea." And then he does a whole parody number of under the sea. And then Marge is like, "We're not moving under the sea. That's the solution to all your problems is moving under the sea. It's not going to happen." Like,
I do love that. And, I have the Wikipedia pulled up here. Dennis Franz, who most people might recognize from NYPD Blue, he actually plays Homer Simpson in a TV movie back in the day, where if there was like a scandal that happened, you had like ABC, Fox, NBC, and CBS like always compete with one another to do these like made-for-TV movies that would tell the stories of these people. And Amy Fisher is a big example to do. I think they made like 3 or 4 movies with her, one of which I own on VHS, with Drew Barrymore, No Place to Hide, and he plays Homer Simpson in that movie, which I thought was a fun fact.
Yeah, this is a good one. Season 6 is just very strong overall.
So good.
But my number 3 pick is from season 7.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
My number 3 pick is 22 short films about Springfield. This is season 7, episode 21. So most of the people on the internet know a segment of this episode, and that is the steamed hams. So this episode is, just like the title says, 22 short films about Springfield. So every 2.5 minutes, you get a different story about different people in Springfield. So you get Bart in Millhouse, you get Apu at the Quickie Mart, Lisa gets gum in her hair, Smithers gets stung by a bee, Dr. Nick has to save Grandpa. But I think the highlight of this episode for most people is Super Nintendo Charmers coming over to Skinner's house for dinner, and like everything going wrong for Skinner, and leading him to have to go to Krusty Burger and bring back hamburgers and pass them off as steamed hams. What I like about this episode is it steps away from the normal format and gives all these different side characters a moment to shine in their own little story. So you get Apu, Dr. Nick, even Reverend Lovejoy gets a little bit. This is the most story that you get from Bumblebee Man at all.
Yeah.
It's just a fun episode. I always remember the Nelson yelling at the kid, the guy in the giant guy in the small car.
Yeah.
And as a 6 foot tall man who drives a Toyota Yaris, I can identify with that guy. You think it's funny you think the size of my automobile is comical? Like, I love this episode. Every little short film here has a moment to gives their characters a moment to shine, and I enjoy every second of it.
I remember, I don't know if you ever have played this or have it, but back in the late 90s, early 2000s, they put out the Simpsons trivia game, and there was a pull-out poster that you could have, and it was just, I mean, probably no more than like 11 by like 17, but it was like every character in Springfield, and this episode really allows those, like you said, like a lot of those side characters to really have legitimate moments to shine.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I actually have a wallet with that on it. I think it's on the other side of my desk, so I can't reach it right now. But yeah, I just enjoy this episode, and the memes that come out of steamed hams over the last few years have been fantastic. I don't know if you've seen steamed hams set to Feel Good Inc. by the Gorillas, but it's fantastic. I will send that to you after the show.
Oh my goodness, I'm excited for this one. So my number 3 pick comes from season 11, episode 23. It is the season finale, and it is Behind the Laughter. This one ranks for me because growing up, every Sunday, the radio station by where I grew up would play episodes of Behind the Music, and I just would listen to it and just fall asleep. And I heard and watched so many of those episodes from that series, and so the first time that I saw Behind the Laughter, it's not a very memorable one, but if you grew up with Behind the Music, they have the narrator from that one coming to do it. I'm trying to but it's
you look for his name. It's Jim Forbes.
Yeah, Jim Forbes. He does such a great job, and I love like Willie Nelson comes in, and it's just kind of like how the Simpsons like started, and then kind of like how fame like got to their head. And there's a moment where Homer ends up buying MC Hammer's house, and when he gets evaded for tax fraud, he's got like both nipples pierced, and like there's just like a vacuum that like comes down from the sky from the helicopter, and they just take all his gold, including ripping off of his nipple rings. And this episode, I think, it's such a funny episode. It's meta Simpsons at their best.
Yeah, this is a fun like mockumentary episode of The Simpsons, and I feel like it plays with like their musical albums that they released a little bit. Like it makes some jokes about that, and it pokes a little bit of fun at the early '90s Simpsons mania, which is still amazing to me that I missed all of that. Yeah, this is a solid one. When I was looking through the list of episodes, like this was on my list of, do I want to revisit that one just to see? I didn't, but I'm glad it made it on your list.
So, fun fact about this episode too is that the BBC chose this to be their last episode ever to be broadcast of The Simpsons, because they had actually lost the broadcasting rights in February 2002 to Channel 4. So in May of 2004, this was the last Simpsons episode ever to be aired on the BBC.
Oh, that's fun. All right, so my number 2 is a episode you and I have talked about before on a different podcast. My number 2 pick is You Only Move Twice from season 8, and this is episode 2. This is the episode where Homer takes a job working for Hank Scorpio in a town called Cypress Creek. He gets a job working at a different nuclear power plant for Hank Scorpio, who is an amalgamation of all the different Bond villains that you can think of. Played by Albert Brooks. This is just a great episode that deals with, like, what's it like to work for an evil mastermind as, like, a low-level employee? Like, what's it like having that mastermind be your boss day to day?
Yeah, I did not know Albert Brooks voiced Scorpio in this one, and then revisiting this episode now with better clearance and better understanding of Bond, it gives me a greater appreciation for this episode. It sits right outside my honorable mentions. I love and adore this episode. But also too, I just love the dynamic of Homer and Hank in this episode. It's like so pure and like so oblivious, but it creates some of the funniest moments.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments is, like, he's giving him the tour of the office, and he's like, Homer, here, hang up my coat. And, like, Homer looks around trying to find a coat rack. He's like, here, we have no walls. And I never handed you my coat. And, like, he takes the coat and, like, wears it backwards to try to impress Homer.
Yeah.
Like, you like my moccasins? You got a pair in your closet. You don't like them? Neither do I. And he just tosses them. Or, like, where to get a hammock? Oh, well, there's... and they just start listing hammock stores, and, like, well, there's a whole hammock district, actually. If you want to just go down there, you'll find something. Yeah, like, the fact that they didn't bring Hank Scorpio back for the Simpsons movie like they were going to kind of bums me out. But you still got Albert Brooks in there as the head of the EPA. So, yeah, this is just a strong episode. Great Bond parodies. Like, when the Simpsons have to leave because everyone else in the family is unhappy with their new life. When Homer has to give his resignation, Hank Scorpio's just like, if you could do me a favor and kill somebody on the way out, I appreciate it. And, like, Homer just, like, kicks a grenade and just kills somebody off screen. Like, it's a good episode, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I love, again, I really, truly love this episode. And I think also too, it's interesting to see how a lot of these characters like Marge, Lisa, and Bart all function in this new environment. Probably one of my favorite moments is, like, they have to send Bart. Is it this episode where they send Bart back to kindergarten? He's like, all right, I call the Flintstones phone.
I don't think it's kindergarten, but he's remedial classes for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think that's a different episode. So
then, like, Marge just, like, picks up drinking because, like, they basically live in a smart house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then Lisa's just allergic to everything. Like, she loves it, but, like, nature is just not friendly to her.
So my number 2 actually still comes from the 8th season as well, and it is only 8 episodes later at episode 10. We previously mentioned it in this episode, but it is the Springfield Files. and I am a diehard X-Files fan. I love the X-Files. I'm looking at Mulder and Scully Pops right now, a couple VHSs that I have, and I have Scully Scully action figure in box.
Nice.
I love the X-Files, and the fact that this is a canonical to X-Files and The Simpsons, which not a whole lot of people know, but I really just love about how Mulder is handled in this episode, where he like flashes his like FBI badge, and it's like the traditional FBI, and then below it is like him like just kind of like spread out in a Speedo. So funny. So
how is this canonical in the X-Files? Do they reference this episode in the show?
They don't, but the way that Chris Carter, who's the creator and the showrunner, has gone on record by basically saying that like the case of the Springfield, and I guess like the entire plot of this is like Homer sees an alien, and it's like then revealed to be Mr. Burns. But they've basically said that like this is a canonical like case within the X-Files.
Okay.
So, but yeah, nice. The Leonard Nimoy guest stars in this. He's kind of like the one like telling you and like walking you through this. It's kind of supposed to be like a spin on Unsolved Mysteries. And then obviously David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson come to play Mulder and Scully respectively. One of my favorite moments in this episode is where they're running all these tests on Homer, and Mulder is having Homer run on a treadmill, and Scully walks in. She's like, "Why are you having him run on a treadmill?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know. I just thought that he could stand to lose a few pounds, but his jiggling is so hypnotic." She's like, "Yes, it is."
This is a good episode. The image of Mr. Burns floating through the forest, like, "Oh, hi everybody!" Like I just like that. When I think of the X-Files, that's what I think of automatically. Like, it's not the actual X-Files itself. It's Mr. Burns, high on drugs, glowing in the forest.
Yeah. And nobody believes Homer because he's, like, always, like, drunk.
Yeah. Oh, man. That's a good second episode, or number 2. So do we want to do our honorable mentions before we dive into our number ones?
Yes, we're gonna do 4 honorable mentions, and we will do them. You want to do them youngest to oldest?
How about youngest to oldest works.
Okay, all right. So I will let you go first.
All right, we just listed these off quick.
Yeah.
All right. So my honorable mentions are New Kids on the Block, which is the Bart in a boy band episode. It features NSYNC. That's season 12, episode 14. As previously mentioned, I Am Furious Yellow was one of my honorable mentions, season 13, episode 18. Lisa the Beauty Queen, which I mentioned earlier, season 4, episode 4, where Lisa goes through the beauty pageants and becomes Little Miss Springfield. And then my last honorable mention is season 3, episode 17, Homer at Bat, which I'm not a huge baseball fan, but if my co-host Ryan didn't hear me mention that on this episode, he'd be very upset. But I do enjoy this episode. It's got a lot of baseball cameos, and it has a great musical number at the end. And it's just a lot of fun, like seeing like all these different cameos play out in the show.
That's not the one where he makes the bat and takes the Plants team to like the finals, is it?
That is, yeah.
Okay.
But then like Jose Canseco comes in and like Burns replaces the whole team.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is that episode.
I thought it was, but I wasn't sure. That is a great episode. I love that episode. It's so hard to pick a top 10 for these because like we get like talking about like all of the ones that are on your list and all the ones that are on my list. And I'm just like, I had such a difficult time doing this, but some episodes just kind of like stuck with me a little bit longer than other ones did.
Yeah.
So my honorable mentions are Flaming Moe's episode 9 of season 3. This is one where Homer creates a drink now, and Moe drinks it and then gains the profits from it. King Size Homer is my second one. Season 7, episode 7. Homer gains 300 pounds to work from home, or has to go over 300 pounds to work from home. Sorry.
Yeah. So you say I don't think he gains 300 pounds and then loses it. That would change the show completely.
Simple Simpson. This is one where Homer becomes Pie Man. Episode 15. Sorry, season 15, episode 19. And then the Heartbroke Kid, season 16, episode 17, Bart gets addicted to hip-hop potato chips.
All right. So my number one pick, if anybody knows me, this isn't surprising. My number one pick is Marge versus the Monorail. Season 4, episode 12. I could do a whole episode on this episode. This is written by Conan O'Brien. It is so the town comes into a surplus of money from Mr. Burns, who's been dumping chemicals illegally. So they are conned by Lyle Lanley, played by Phil Hartman, into building a monorail in the town. They do a whole musical number. This is where The Simpsons starts to go into the bizarre and weird humor, which I just love completely. You have Leonard Nimoy show up at the ribbon cutting ceremony, just doing weird Leonard Nimoy stuff. What are your thoughts on this episode?
Man, this almost cracked my top 10. I sing this song all the time. This is a great episode, and Phil Hartman, rest in peace. We celebrated our 100th episode going through Phil Hartman properties, and man, this is if we did not talk about The Simpsons on that episode, we would be terrible. Yeah. But yeah, I love so much of this episode.
Like right from the get-go, the opening of this episode is Homer leaving the power plant to the Flintstones theme song. Yeah. But he changes the words Homer Simpson. Just from that point on, it's just a strong episode. And then when you get to the end where you have Leonard Nimoy being like, my work here is done. And then somebody says, you didn't do anything of that, didn't I? And then he just teleports away. Like, it's so weird and random, but it all works so well.
Yeah, I think also, too, one of my favorite scenes from this episode is where Marge is kind of suspicious about the monorail, and she sees, Phil Hartman's character's, map, and it's just, written on cities. It's not anything, real, and, then she goes to, visit all of the cities. It's such, a great B-plot. But it just kind of really shows about, Phil Hartman can just do anything he wants in The Simpsons, and it's great.
The greatest part about the Marge subplot, where she's investigating Lyle Lanley and all these monorails, is she picks up this scientist from Ogdenville, I think, and they show up as the train's speeding around the tracks, and he gets out, and his hair's a lot shorter. He's like, "Oh no, we're too late. I should not have stopped for that haircut." It's such a weird, it's such a quick moment, but it just keeps going. There's all these different little small moments, like the mayor and Quimby arguing about the town charter, and then it just it takes a break to have them look over the town charter. According to this, every month I should get a pig and two broads, and the mayor's like, "Well, tell me how many women I get." It's such a strong episode. It's one of my favorite. It's by far my favorite episode of all time. When I told my wife this was my number one, she's like, "Yeah, that's not surprising." Because this is my go. If you had to make me watch an episode of The Simpsons, this would be the one I put on right away.
Also, this episode too has when they finally get to the monorail and they're trying to get a hold of Homer. He's like, Marge is like radio through. She's like, Homer, there's someone here that you need to hear. Is it Badman? No, it's a scientist. Badman's a scientist.
Yeah. Yes.
So good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yep. No, I was just going to say George Takei was supposed to be in this episode, but he declined, and then they got Leonard Nimoy. So
my number one pick was actually one of your honorable mentions, and that was New Kids on the Block. And
okay,
this is my favorite episode, and I didn't realize it was my favorite episode until I went to go watch it the other night and knew every word that's in this episode. Growing up, I was such a huge NSYNC fan, and this was always my favorite episode to catch on. Anytime it came on when I was living with my parents, and I saw that it was coming on, I would always DVR this, and I'd watch it multiple times before deleting it. All of the music in this episode is so on point, and then like using boy bands to recruit for the Navy is such an awesome subplot, and I love the line where they're in it's right after LT Smash kind of breaks and loses his mind, and it pans to the Mad magazine office, and they're like, how about everybody hates Raymond? And they're just like, it took us all night, but it was worth it, to come up with like the 3 headlines, which I just thought was so funny. But so much of this episode is so good.
I can't see the words. I can't see an ad for the military without seeing Ivan Netniaj.
Same.
And I love the NSYNC cameo is just them.
Word.
Yeah, Justin Timberlake just being a word. And what's the song that plays? Is it Pop when they come in and dance?
It's actually No Strings Attached, because
is it?
I think Pop hadn't come out yet, but it's the basic line. It's like the basic like music chorus of No Strings Attached, which was the title track to the second album.
Okay, yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, this was a mighty contender for my list as well. I'm just surprised we did not have any overlap in our top 10s. I'm kind of impressed. I'm slightly
what's the word? I also thought that too, that it was weird that neither one of us had overlap. But yeah, I think that this is these are great episodes that we've both picked, and if I had to only watch these 14 episodes, I think that I would be still satisfied with The Simpsons.
I mean, if I had to watch all, like, between us, we have like 20 episodes. Mm-hmm. Like, I'd be happy watching any of these right now. Yeah. These are all strong episodes. I'm a huge Simpsons fan. There are 639 episodes as of this recording, so it's not surprising that we didn't pick the same ones. It's just a little shocking. Like, I thought we would have some overlap, but I'm glad we didn't.
I mean, we kind of did. Like, we had that like overlap in like the honorable mentions.
We barely overlapped. But I thought like our picks were gonna my number 10 was gonna be your number 1. I'm happy that it was like one of my honorable mentions is your number 1. So
yeah, man, it's in sync. You know, no one pouts going into a jiggy. That's stupid.
Word.
He actually so all of his dialogue was summed up to word, and the reason that was, it was actually, if I remember correctly, like, it was out of spite because he complained about the way that his character was written, and so they're like, oh well, we're just gonna bring you down to word. And if you watch the episode, it's literally the same exact frame just reused over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, that is our top 10 Simpsons episode picks. But let us know what your favorite Simpsons episode of all time is and what's your least favorite. Alan, do you have a least favorite episode?
I don't think I do. I like all the Simpsons. I will watch any episode of The Simpsons you make me. I don't think there's one that I don't like at all.
Same. I think that there are episodes where like I am not really a huge fan of, but I don't outright like hate them.
Yeah, I mean there are some episodes that are hard to watch. Like any episode, like characters' last episodes are hard to watch. Like I'm trying to think how they killed off Krabappel, but I feel like I repressed that. But I also feel like they didn't really address it at all in the show. So, yeah, I don't really think there is a Simpsons episode I don't like.
I probably would. Well, I would probably submit for like episodes that are like clip shows are just annoying. 180, The Simpsons 138th episode spectacular definitely is in the running for one of my least favorite episodes.
One of the best things about the clip shows is like the one clip show is they do like a whole "We Didn't Start the Fire" parody about different things that happened on The Simpsons.
Yeah.
And it's like, sorry about the clip show. You'll never stop The Simpsons. Have no fears. We got stories for years. Like I like that they at least have fun with the clip shows. Like they're like, yeah, well, this is just something we have to do because of the logistics of running a cartoon.
Yeah.
But here's some extra humor for you just at the end.
And now, the reason you all came here. Hardcore nudity. It's from the it's how they end the 138th spectacular. But where can people find out more information about You Have to Watch This Podcast?
You can follow us on our Instagram channel. You Have to Watch This Podcast. You can also find us on Twitch. Our Twitch channel, we go live weekly with our show every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We also have different live streams throughout the week, so make sure to hit that follow button so you can stay in tune with that. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook. You can find me on Instagram at acram4815. And that's about it.
You guys can follow me on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. You guys can also go to victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can find past episodes, our spin-off podcast, That's High Praise, a Nicolas Cage podcast, Coffee and Conversations, and all of our backlog of regular episodes, along with movie reviews, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. That's victimsandvillains.net, all of which you guys can find along with You Have to Watch This Podcast resources, well, links as well in the descriptions wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Thank you guys for listening. Have a good one, guys.